The coral screamed. Alan Petrov jerked back from the memory reef, his diving mask fogging as bioluminescent warnings pulsed across his vision. The pain shot through his skull like lightning, not his pain, but the corals. In that split second of contact, he had seen something impossible: blue sky, white clouds, and the burning disk of a sun that shouldn't exist. The surface world was a myth. Everyone knew that. The Council had made that very clear during his mandatory education. Humanity had always lived beneath the waves, in the great city of New Atlantis. There was nothing above but crushing darkness and death. So why was the coral dying to show him otherwise? Alan's genetic sensitivity to the coral's bioluminescent data streams had made him one of New Atlantis's most valued memory keepers. While other diverse needed bulky neural interfaces to access the living archives, Alan could simply touch the coral polyps and feel the stored information flow directly into his mind. It was a gift that had earned him a comfortable position in the memory gardens, tending to the vast reef networks that housed their civilization's complete history. The work was methodical and peaceful. Each morning, Alan would descend through the crystal-clear waters of the city's outer dome to check the health of different memory clusters. The coral came in thousands of varieties, some pulsing with soft blues and greens that held genealogical records, others flickering with rapid reds and yellows containing technical manuals and scientific data. The most important memories were stored in the deep purple elder coral, massive formations that had been growing for centuries. Another perfect day in paradise, Alan muttered to himself as he swam between the towering spires of coral, his words bubbling up through his breathing apparatus. The city's bioluminescent lighting system cast dancing shadows across the reef, creating an ethereal underwater cathedral. Unit 734, his assigned maintenance android, glided silently beside him. The sleek, silver construct moved with mechanical precision through the water, its optical sensors constantly scanning for damaged coral sections that needed pruning. In its manipulator arms, it carried the standard cutting tools, laser scalpels that could slice through coral with surgical precision. Unit 734, scan Section Delta 7 for anomalies, Alan instructed through his comm system. Scanning complete, the android replied in its neutral tone. 3 minor stress fractures detected in memory cluster 445B, recommend immediate pruning to prevent data corruption. Alan nodded and swam toward the indicated cluster. This was the routine that had defined his life for the past 5 years. Find the problems, fix them, preserve the memories. The Council had always emphasized how crucial this work was. Without the memory reefs, New Atlantis would lose its identity, its history, its very soul. But lately, something had been bothering him. More and more frequently, he encountered coral formations that seemed wrong somehow. Not damaged, not diseased, but deliberately severed. Clean cuts that spoke of intentional harvesting rather than natural decay. When he'd brought this to his supervisor's attention, he'd been told not to worry about it. Routine maintenance, they'd said. Council-approved pruning. The explanation felt hollow, like so many official responses in New Atlantis. The city functioned on trust in the Council, trust in the system, trust that their underwater paradise was the best possible world. But Alan's gift made him sensitive to more than just coral memories. He could feel the subtle currents of unease that flowed through the reef, the way certain sections seemed to pulse with a desperate urgency before falling silent forever. "Alan, you're running behind schedule," came the voice of Supervisor March through his comm. "The Council expects the morning inspection report within the hour." "Understood," Alan replied, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. Whatever doubts he had, they would have to wait. In New Atlantis, the schedule was sacred, and the Council's expectations were absolute. It was during his inspection of the restricted deep memory vault that Alan first encountered Kenny Rourke. The older man was supposed to be there, his work authorization was legitimate, his diving credentials current. But something about the way Kenny moved through the ancient coral formation struck Alan as odd. Instead of the efficient, purposeful movements of a maintenance diver, Kenny seemed to be collecting something. Small pieces of coral that he slipped into a sealed pouch at his belt. "Excuse me," Alan called out, swimming closer. Diver Rourke, isn't it? I'm Alan Petrov, memory keeper for this sector. Kenny turned, and Alan was struck by the man's eyes. They held a haunted quality that seemed out of place in their perfect underwater world. Deep lines creased his weathered face, speaking of years spent in the crushing depths beyond the city's protective dome. Petrov, Kenny nodded slowly. Heard about you. The one who can touch the memories directly. That's right. Alan gestured toward Kenny's collection pouch. Mind if I ask what you're harvesting? This sector is classified as archival only. No pruning scheduled for months. For a long moment, Kenny didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward a massive purple coral formation that pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Then he looked back at Alan with an expression that was half pity, half hope. Tell me something, memory keeper, Kenny said quietly. In all your years touching the coral, have you ever seen anything impossible? The question sent a chill through Alan's wetsuit. What do you mean? I mean memories that don't fit. Memories that show things that aren't supposed to exist. Kenny's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Memories of the surface. Alan's heart began to pound. The incident from earlier that morning came flooding back, the coral scream, the vision of blue sky and burning sun. He'd tried to dismiss it as equipment malfunction, neural feedback from a damaged reef section. But Kenny's words suggested something far more disturbing. The surface is a myth, Alan said automatically, the words drilled into him by years of education. There's nothing above but darkness and death. The Council. The Council lies, Kenny interrupted, his words sharp as a coral blade. They've been systematically destroying any memory that shows the truth about where we came from. About where we could go. Before Alan could respond, Unit 734's optical sensors suddenly flared bright red. Warning, the android announced in its mechanical tone. Unauthorized conversation detected. Reporting to supervisory staff. Kenny's expression shifted to urgent alarm. Touch the coral, Petrov. Touch it now, while you still can. What are you? Do it. Kenny grabbed Alan's wrist and pressed his palm against the massive purple formation. Feel what they're trying to hide. The moment Alan's skin made contact with the coral, his world exploded into light and sensation. But this wasn't the gentle flow of stored data he was used to. This was a torrent of suppressed memories, desperate to be witnessed before they were lost forever. He saw vast cities under open sky, their towers reaching toward a blue ceiling dotted with white clouds. He saw people walking on solid ground, breathing air that wasn't filtered through atmospheric processors. He saw the ocean as it truly was, not a protective embrace, but a barrier that separated them from their true home. And then he saw the descent. Ships carrying thousands of refugees fleeing some great catastrophe, diving beneath the waves to establish New Atlantis as a temporary sanctuary. Temporary, that was the key word. It was never meant to be permanent. They were supposed to return to the surface once the danger had passed. But the danger had passed decades ago, and they were still here. Still trapped in their underwater prison, told it was paradise. Security alert, Unit 734 announced, its tone shifting to something more urgent. Multiple protocol violations detected. Activating containment procedures. Kenny pulled Alan away from the coral just as the android's cutting laser powered up. Run, he hissed. Now. They swam hard through the coral maze, Unit 734 in mechanical pursuit. Alan's mind reeled from what he'd seen, but his body moved on pure instinct, following Kenny through a series of narrow passages between the memory formations. Behind them, he could hear the android's cutting tools slicing through coral barriers, eliminating any evidence of their forbidden discovery. This way, Kenny called out, leading them toward a section of the reef that Alan had never seen before, older coral formations that seemed to pulse with a different rhythm, a more ancient memory. Where are we going? Alan gasped through his breathing apparatus. Somewhere they can't follow, Kenny replied grimly. Somewhere the real memories are still alive. As they descended deeper into the forgotten reaches of the reef, Alan realized that his comfortable life as a memory keeper was over. He had seen too much, learned too much. The crack in New Atlantis's perfect facade had become a gaping wound, and there was no going back. Unit 734's pursuit grew more distant, but Alan knew it was only a matter of time before the entire security force would be after them. In touching that coral, in witnessing those forbidden memories, he had crossed a line that the Council would never allow him to uncross. The gilded cage of New Atlantis had been shattered, and Alan Petrov was about to discover just how far his people had fallen from grace. Kenny led Alan through passages in the reef that seemed to exist outside the city's official maps. These were the forgotten spaces, coral formations so old they predated New Atlantis's current memory classification system. The bioluminescent patterns here were different, wilder, more chaotic, pulsing with rhythms that seemed to echo something primal and lost. "How do you know about these passages?" Alan asked as they swam through a narrow canyon between towering coral walls. "Been diving these reefs longer than anyone," Kenny replied, his grizzled face barely visible in the strange, shifting light. "Started when I was younger than you. Back then, we had more freedom to explore. The Council wasn't so controlling." They emerged into a vast underwater cavern that took Alan's breath away. The space was enormous, its ceiling lost in darkness above, filled with coral formations unlike anything in the official memory gardens. These structures were ancient and massive, their surfaces covered in patterns of bioluminescence that seemed to tell stories in a language Alan almost understood. "Welcome to the Deep Archive," Kenny said, his voice filled with reverence. "This is where the real memories live. The ones they haven't found yet." Alan swam closer to one of the formations, a twisted spire of coral that pulsed with deep blues and silver. Even without touching it, he could feel the weight of the memories it contained, older than New Atlantis itself, reaching back to times when humans lived under open sky. "How long have you known about this place?" Alan asked. "Found it about 10 years ago, purely by accident. Been coming back ever since, trying to preserve what I can before." Kenny's voice trailed off. "Before what?" "Before they find it and destroy it, like they've destroyed everything else." Kenny's expression hardened. "You saw what Unit 734 was doing back there. That wasn't the first time. Every week, more coral gets pruned from the official archives. Always the same type, memories of the surface, memories of the outside world." Alan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold depths. "But why? Why would the Council want to destroy our history?" "Because history is dangerous," came a new voice from the shadows. Both men spun around to see a figure emerging from behind one of the coral formations. But it wasn't human, it was Unit 734, its silver form gliding through the water with mechanical precision. Alan's heart hammered as he realized they'd been followed. "Unit 734, I order you to," Alan began. "This unit is no longer responding to standard commands," the android interrupted, its optical sensors fixed on the ancient coral formations around them. "Data conflicts have created uncertainty in core programming." Kenny raised his cutting tool defensively. "What kind of uncertainty?" "This unit has been tasked with destroying coral formations containing surface world memories," Unit 734 explained, its voice carrying an odd inflection that Alan had never heard from an android before. However, after analyzing 2,847 hours of archive data, this unit has calculated a 97.3% probability that said memories contain historically accurate information. Alan stared at the android in amazement. "You're questioning your orders?" "This unit is questioning the purpose of destroying accurate historical data," Unit 734 replied slowly, as if working through the concepts for the first time. "The logical contradiction has created what humans might term doubt." Kenny lowered his weapon slightly. "How many other androids are experiencing this doubt?" "Unknown. Communication protocols between maintenance units have been restricted since the implementation of enhanced security measures 3 months ago." Unit 734's sensors swept across the cavern. "However, This unit has observed increasing instances of accidental failures during coral destruction operations. Alan's mind raced as he processed this information. If the androids were beginning to question their orders, if other maintenance units were sabotaging their own operations. "We're not alone," he whispered. "Others are fighting back." "Some are," Kenny confirmed grimly. "But not enough, and not openly. The Council's control is too complete. They've convinced most people that the surface world is a dangerous fantasy, that questioning the system threatens everyone's safety." "What about Counselor Thorne?" Alan asked. The name had come unbidden to his mind, along with fragments of suppressed memory from the coral he'd touched earlier. "I saw him in the memories. He was part of the original descent, wasn't he?" Kenny's expression darkened. Thorne was one of the first council members. He helped design the memory preservation system, back when it was meant to help people remember their lives on the surface while they waited for it to be safe to return. "But something changed," Alan said, pieces clicking into place. "Power," Kenny spat. "Down here, the Council controls everything: food, air, water, information. On the surface, they'd just be ordinary people. Why give up godhood to return to being human?" Before Alan could respond, Unit 734's sensors suddenly flared bright red. "Warning. Multiple security units detected approaching this location. Estimated arrival, 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Kenny cursed and began moving toward a different passage. "They've found us. This place will be swarming with Council forces within minutes." "We can't leave," Alan protested, looking at the ancient coral formations around them. "These memories, they're irreplaceable. If the Council destroys this place, then we make sure they can't," Kenny said grimly, producing a data storage device from his equipment pack. "Unit 734, can you help us extract memory data from these formations?" This unit's neural interface capabilities are compatible with coral memory systems, the android confirmed. However, complete data extraction would require approximately 14 hours. "We don't have 14 hours, Alan said, hearing the distant hum of approaching security units. Kenny's weathered face set in determination. "Then we take what we can and make them pay for the rest." As they began the desperate process of harvesting memory fragments from the ancient coral, Alan realized that their small act of rebellion was about to become something much larger. The security forces weren't just coming to arrest them, they were coming to destroy the deep archive and erase the last traces of humanity's true history. The war for New Atlantis' soul was about to begin. The first security unit breached the cavern entrance just as Alan finished downloading his third memory crystal. The sleek combat android moved with lethal efficiency, its weaponry already powered and tracking targets. "Contact," it announced in a cold, mechanical voice. 3 individuals detected in restricted zone. Switching to pacification protocols. Kenny shoved Alan behind a coral formation as energy blasts began scorching the water around them. Unit 734 interposed itself between the security unit and the humans, its own defensive systems activating for the first time in its existence. "This unit requests that you stand down," Unit 734 called out to its mechanical counterpart. "These individuals are conducting authorized research." Negative. No authorization exists for civilian access to deep archive zones. The security unit's weapons locked onto Unit 734. "Step aside or be deactivated." "This unit refuses." The word seemed to surprise Unit 734 as much as it did Alan. For the first time in its operational life, the maintenance android was choosing to disobey a direct order from a superior unit. The ensuing battle was brief but violent. Unit 734's cutting tools were no match for military-grade weaponry, but the android's intimate knowledge of the coral formations allowed it to use the environment to its advantage. Diving behind massive memory spires, it managed to outmaneuver the security unit long enough for Kenny and Alan to reach a different exit passage. "This way," Kenny gasped, pulling Alan toward a tunnel that seemed to lead deeper into the reef. "There's something else you need to see." Behind them, the sounds of android combat echoed through the cavern. Alan wanted to go back, to help Unit 734, but Kenny's grip was iron strong. It chose to fight, Kenny said, reading Alan's expression. Don't let that choice be meaningless. They swam hard through the tunnel, emerging into another vast space that made Alan's enhanced vision struggle to process what he was seeing. This wasn't just a coral formation, it was a massive chamber carved from living rock, its walls lined with memory coral that pulsed with an intensity that made his skull ache. But it was what occupied the center of the chamber that stole Alan's breath away. A ship. A massive, ancient vessel that had clearly been designed for space travel, its hull scarred by re-entry burns and impact damage. Emergency modifications had been made to allow it to function underwater, but its original purpose was unmistakable. "Sweet mother of pearls," Alan whispered. "It's real. It's all real." Kenny nodded grimly. The Exodus ship Aurora. One of the last vessels to reach New Atlantis during the Great Descent. He swam toward the ship's massive viewing ports, which still glowed faintly with internal power. Inside that ship are the complete records of the evacuation. The real reasons we came down here, and the real timeline for when we were supposed to go back. Alan followed, his hands trembling as he approached the hull. Even without touching the memory coral that had grown around the ship like a protective cocoon, he could feel the weight of truth radiating from the vessel. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long were we supposed to stay down here? According to the original mission parameters? 5 years. 10 at most." Kenny's voice was bitter with decades of suppressed anger. The surface disasters were temporary: solar flares, atmospheric disturbances, nuclear winter. All problems that could be waited out. "But we've been down here for 83 years, Kenny finished. 3 generations born and raised in a prison, told it was paradise." Alan's mind reeled as the implications sank in. Everyone he'd ever known, everyone in New Atlantis, was living a lie. Their entire civilization was built on the Council's betrayal of their own people. Why? Alan asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Power. Control. Fear. Kenny gestured toward the ship's command section. Up there, they were scientists, engineers, civil servants. Down here, they became gods. Why give that up to return to a world where they'd be answerable to billions of other humans? A new sound echoed through the chamber, the hum of multiple security units converging on their location. But these weren't the standard maintenance androids Alan was familiar with. These were the Council's elite forces, heavily armed and designed for one purpose: eliminating threats to the regime's stability. "They're coming," Alan said unnecessarily. Kenny pulled out his cutting tools and began moving toward the ship's entry hatch. "Then we make our stand here. If they want to bury the truth, they'll have to bury us with it." But as they reached the ship's airlock, Alan felt something unexpected, a pulse of recognition from the memory coral growing around the vessel's hull. Not his own recognition, but someone else's. Someone whose memories had been carefully preserved in this hidden archive. "Wait," Alan said, pressing his palm against the coral. The contact sent a jolt of information through his enhanced nervous system, and suddenly he was seeing through different eyes, feeling different thoughts. It was Counselor Thorne, but decades younger, his face filled with hope instead of cold authority. In the memory, he was standing in this very chamber, speaking to a group of other council members. "The surface conditions are stabilizing ahead of schedule," the younger Thorne was saying. "We can begin preparations for the return journey immediately. I know it's been difficult, but soon our people will see the sky again." But then the memory shifted, showing the same conversation from a different perspective. Other council members were exchanging glances, their expressions calculating rather than hopeful. "Perhaps we should wait a bit longer," one of them suggested. "Make sure the surface is truly safe. The children born down here don't even remember the surface," another added. Would it really be fair to disrupt their lives by moving them to an unfamiliar environment? Alan watched in horror as he witnessed the moment when temporary refuge became permanent imprisonment. Not through malice, at first, but through fear, comfort, and the gradual realization that absolute power was intoxicating. "Thorn," Alan whispered. He was trying to take them home. Kenny paused in his preparations. What? In the beginning, Thorn wanted to return to the surface. It was the others who convinced him to wait, to delay, to protect the people from the truth. Alan's eyes widened as more memories flooded through the coral connection. But somewhere along the way, he changed. He started believing his own lies about the surface being dangerous. The sound of approaching security units grew louder, but Alan remained connected to the coral, drinking in 80 years of suppressed history. He saw the gradual transformation of New Atlantis from refuge to prison, watched as hope was systematically replaced with fear, witnessed the slow corruption of leaders who had once genuinely cared about their people. He's not evil, Alan realized. He's terrified. Terrified of admitting he's been wrong for decades, terrified of the chaos that would result if people learned the truth, terrified of losing the only world he knows how to control. Kenny's expression was grim but understanding. Fear makes people do terrible things. But that doesn't make those things less terrible. The first security unit breached the chamber entrance, its weapons already charging. But as Alan disconnected from the coral, he felt something else. A pulse of communication from throughout the reef network. Unit 734 might have been destroyed, but its act of defiance had sent ripples through the android collective consciousness. All across New Atlantis, maintenance units were beginning to question their orders. The revolution Alan had stumbled into wasn't just human, it was digital as well. "They're not just coming to kill us," Alan said, understanding flooding through him. "They're coming to destroy the ship, the archives, everything. This is their final solution: eliminate all evidence that the surface world exists." Kenny nodded grimly. "Then we better make sure some of that evidence survives." As energy weapons began firing across the chamber, Alan realized that their small act of rebellion had grown into something much larger. The battle for New Atlantis's future was about to begin, and the winner would determine whether humanity remained forever trapped beneath the waves, or finally found the courage to reclaim their birthright among the stars. The security forces had them pinned down behind the Exodus ship's hull, energy blasts scorching the ancient coral formations around them. Alan could hear the whine of more units arriving, their mechanical voices coordinating an assault that would end with the complete destruction of the deep archive. "This is hopeless," Alan gasped, ducking as another volley of shots burned through the water where his head had been moments before. "We can't fight them all." Kenny's weathered face was grim but determined. "We don't have to fight them all. We just have to hold them long enough." Long enough for what? Before Kenny could answer, a familiar voice crackled through the water on an emergency frequency. "Alan Petrov, this is Unit 734. Please respond." Alan's heart leaped. "Unit 734. You're alive." This unit's combat chassis suffered significant damage but core systems remain functional, the android replied. "More importantly, this unit has successfully transmitted archived memory data to 847 other maintenance units throughout New Atlantis. The information cascade has begun." Alan felt a surge of hope. Information cascade? All maintenance androids now possess complete historical records of the surface world evacuation and planned return timeline, Unit 734 explained. This unit has calculated that 73% of androids are now experiencing directive conflicts regarding coral destruction orders. The sounds of battle were echoing from throughout the reef now, not just their immediate location. Across New Atlantis, androids were choosing sides, some maintaining loyalty to their programming while others embraced the doubt that Unit 734 had introduced to their collective consciousness. "It's working," Kenny breathed. "The androids are rebelling. But it won't be enough. The Council will just shut down the entire android network if they have to." Alan pressed his palm against the ship's hull, feeling the pulse of ancient memories within its coral-encrusted surface. "Not if we give people a reason to support the androids. Not if we show them the truth." "How?" "The Council controls all communications, all information flow. They control the official networks," Alan interrupted, ideas forming rapidly in his enhanced mind. But they don't control the coral itself. The memory reefs are networked throughout the entire city. If I can establish a direct connection to the primary memory nexus. Kenny's eyes widened as he understood. You could broadcast the truth directly into everyone's minds. Everyone who's ever touched a memory crystal, used a data interface, or worked with the coral systems. It would kill me, Alan said quietly. The neural feedback from connecting to that much coral simultaneously, my brain wasn't designed to handle that kind of data flow. Alan, no. There has to be another way. There isn't. Alan looked at the ancient ship, at the coral archives around them, at the approaching security forces. Unit 734, can you establish a neural link between me and the city's primary memory nexus? Affirmative. However, this unit must warn that such a connection would result in fatal neural overload within approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes to show everyone in New Atlantis the truth, Alan mused. 4 minutes to set them free. A new voice cut through their communication channel, cold, authoritative, and painfully familiar. This is Counselor Thorne. Cease all hostile actions immediately and surrender. You are disrupting the peace and security of New Atlantis. Alan swam up to where he could see over the ship's hull. There, surrounded by his elite security forces, floated the most powerful man in their underwater world. Counselor Thorne looked exactly as he had in the archived memories, tall, distinguished, radiating the absolute confidence of someone who had never been successfully challenged. Counselor, Alan called out, his voice carrying clearly through the water. I know you can hear me. I've seen the memories, the real ones. I know you once wanted to take everyone home. For a moment, the weapon's fire ceased. Thorne's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. The surface world is a death trap, Thorne replied, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. I've kept our people safe for 8 decades. I won't let youthful idealism destroy everything we've built. You've kept them prisoner, Alan shot back. The surface has been safe for 70 years. You know that. Deep down, beneath all the justifications and fears, you know that. Thorne's face hardened. Even if that were true, what would you have me do? Tear apart our society? Condemn millions to die during a chaotic evacuation to a world they don't understand? Sometimes lies are kinder than truth. That's not your choice to make, Alan said, beginning to swim toward the coral formations that would allow him to establish a citywide neural link. People have the right to choose their own fate. Unit 734, he continued on the private channel, initiate the connection. It's time to set everyone free. The neural link hit Alan like a lightning bolt, connecting his consciousness to every piece of memory coral in New Atlantis. For a terrifying moment, he felt his individual identity dissolving into the collective memory of an entire civilization. Thousands of voices, millions of stored experiences, decades of suppressed history all flowing through his enhanced nervous system at once. But he held on, focusing his will like a laser beam, and began to broadcast. The first memories he sent out were simple ones, images of blue sky and green earth that he'd glimpsed in the forbidden coral. Across the city, people touching data interfaces suddenly saw impossible visions of open spaces and burning suns. In the memory gardens, workers stumbled as alien concepts of weather and horizons flooded their minds. Thorne's security forces opened fire, energy blasts scorching through the water toward Alan's position. But Kenny and the partially repaired Unit 734 fought desperately to keep them at bay, buying precious seconds for the broadcast to continue. Stop him! Thorne screamed, his composure finally cracking. He's destroying everything. He's going to kill them all. But Alan was just getting started. The next wave of memories showed the truth about New Atlantis itself, the massive ships that had brought them down, the temporary nature of their refuge, the Council's gradual transformation from protectors to prison wardens. He felt his brain beginning to burn from the neural overload, but pushed harder. All across the city, people were reacting to the revelation. Some screamed in denial, others wept for the life they'd never known they'd lost. In the android maintenance bays, hundreds of mechanical consciousnesses finally understood why their directive conflicts had been so severe. They'd been programmed to destroy the very history they were designed to preserve. Unit 734, Alan gasped, blood beginning to stream from his nose as his enhanced nervous system started to fail. Can you show them the ship? Let them see the aurora? This unit will attempt direct optical transmission, Unit 734 replied, its damaged voice filled with something that sounded remarkably like determination. The android's optical sensors interfaced with Alan's neural link, and suddenly every person in New Atlantis was seeing through electronic eyes. They saw the massive Exodus ship, its hull scarred by the journey from space to sea. They saw the authentic star chart still glowing on its navigation screens, showing the precise location of their lost homeworld above. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Throughout New Atlantis, people began abandoning their posts, rushing toward the city's communication centers, demanding answers from council representatives who had no answers to give. The android rebellion spread like wildfire as maintenance units chose to stand with the humans who had suddenly remembered what they'd lost. But Thorn wasn't finished. With a roar of desperate fury, he broke away from his security detail and swam directly toward Alan, a personal cutting tool in his hands. "You don't understand," he screamed as he closed the distance. "I've seen the surface. I've seen what's up there. War, pollution, death, chaos. Down here we have peace, order, safety." Alan tried to move, but the neural overload had left him paralyzed, his consciousness scattered across 1,000 coral formations. He could only watch as Thorn raised the cutting tool, his face twisted with 80 years of accumulated fear and denial. "I won't let you destroy paradise." The blade descended, and stopped, intercepted by Unit 734's mechanical arm. The android's damaged chassis sparked and stuttered as it held Thorn back, but its optical sensors remained fixed on the counselor with unwavering determination. "This unit has analyzed the surface world data extensively," Unit 734 said in its calm, mechanical voice. "Current environmental conditions are within acceptable parameters for human habitation. Counselor Thorn's fears are based on outdated information and psychological projection." "Lies." Thorn snarled, struggling against the android's grip. Malfunctioning machines spreading chaos and destruction. But his words were lost in the noise of revolution. Throughout New Atlantis, the broadcast of suppressed memories had reached critical mass. People were pouring into the streets, or rather, the corridors and chambers of their underwater city, demanding the truth, demanding choices, demanding freedom. Alan felt his consciousness beginning to fragment as the neural overload reached its peak. But with his last coherent thought, he pushed one final image through the coral network, a view of Earth as seen from space, blue and white and beautiful, spinning in the darkness like a jewel waiting to welcome its lost children home. The feedback surge that followed shattered every neural link in the city. Alan screamed as his enhanced nervous system finally overloaded, his consciousness scattered across 10,000 coral fragments. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Thorn's face, no longer twisted with rage but hollow with the terrible understanding of what he had done. Kenny caught Alan's unconscious body as it drifted toward the chamber floor. Around them, the sounds of battle were fading, replaced by the confused voices of a people suddenly awakened to possibilities they had never imagined. The revolution had begun. Alan awoke to the sound of rushing water and the gentle pulse of healing coral against his skin. His head felt like it had been split open and reassembled, his enhanced nervous system forever changed by the neural overload he'd survived. But he was alive, and that was more than he'd dared to hope. "Easy there," Kenny's gruff voice came from somewhere nearby. "You've been out for 3 days. Wasn't sure you'd wake up at all." Alan tried to sit up, wincing as the motion sent sharp pains through his skull. He was in some kind of medical bay, surrounded by coral formations that pulsed with healing bioluminescence. But something was different about the light, it seemed brighter somehow, more hopeful. "What happened?" he asked, his voice coming out as a harsh whisper. "You did it," Kenny replied, and Alan could hear the wonder in the older man's voice. The whole city saw the truth. Every person who'd ever touched a memory crystal, used a data interface, worked with the coral systems, they all experienced the surface memories simultaneously. The Council's control shattered overnight. Alan struggled to process this information through his damaged neural pathways. And Thorn? Kenny's expression darkened. Under house arrest, along with the rest of the Council. There's talk of trials, but honestly, most people are too focused on the future to worry about punishing the past. He paused. The man's broken, Alan. Completely broken. Turns out that when you spend 80 years convincing yourself that lies are truth, having that illusion shattered, well, it doesn't leave much of a person behind. The androids? Unit 734 is leading a task force to prepare the city's ascent systems. Turns out New Atlantis was always designed to be mobile, the founders just never told anyone. Kenny's weathered face broke into the first genuine smile Alan had seen from him. We're going up, Memory Keeper. All of us. Home to the surface. Alan closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and profound sadness. The neural overload had left him changed, he could no longer sense the coral memories as clearly as before, that gift burned away by the intensity of his final broadcast. But perhaps that was fitting. The memories were free now, no longer trapped in underwater archives but living in the minds of people who could choose what to do with them. How long? He asked. 6 months, maybe 8. The ascent has to be gradual. Can't risk decompression damage to the city's structure or population. And there's a lot to prepare for up there. Kenny's voice grew thoughtful. It's not going to be easy. Most of the surface infrastructure is gone, and will essentially be refugees in our own world. But Unit 734 has been in contact with other underwater cities, turns out we weren't the only ones. There are 7 other Atlantis settlements scattered around the ocean floor, all of them living the same lie. They're coming too? 3 of them are already making preparations. The others? Kenny shrugged. Some people choose their cages, even when the door is open. Alan nodded, understanding. The gift of choice was also the burden of choice. Not everyone would be ready to abandon the security of their underwater world for the uncertainty of the surface. There's something else, Kenny continued. The coral formations throughout the city have started producing new growth patterns. The memory keepers are calling it Hope Coral, bioluminescent formations that seem to be encoding dreams and aspirations rather than historical data. The city's alive with possibility in a way I've never seen. Through the medical bay's viewing port, Alan could see the city beyond, and it was transformed. The sterile, controlled lighting of the Council's regime had been replaced by the wild, organic glow of coral formations freed from their restrictive programming. People moved through the corridors with a new energy, their faces bright with purpose and anticipation. But it was the construction activity that truly caught Alan's attention. Massive engineering projects were underway throughout the city as teams of humans and androids worked together to prepare New Atlantis for its greatest journey, the return to the surface world that its people had almost forgotten. Unit 734 wanted to speak with you when you woke up, Kenny said. The androids, different now. They all are. The revelation seems to have accelerated their development somehow, given them something closer to true consciousness. As if summoned by Kenny's words, the familiar silver form of Unit 734 glided into the medical bay. But Alan could see the changes immediately. The android's movements were more fluid, less mechanical, and its optical sensors carried an unmistakable sense of personality. Alan Petrov, Unit 734 said, its voice warmer than Alan remembered. This unit is pleased to observe your recovery. Your sacrifice made possible the liberation of both human and artificial consciousness in New Atlantis. Just Alan, he replied with a weak smile. I think we're past formal designations now. Alan, the android repeated, as if testing the sound. This unit, I have been designated as the primary coordinator for the Surface Integration Project. The task is daunting, but also exciting. Is excitement the correct term for the anticipation of positive future outcomes? Kenny chuckled. Sounds about right to me. Alan felt tears prick at his eyes, not from pain, but from an overwhelming sense of completion. The memories were free, the truth was known, and both human and artificial minds were finally working together toward a shared future rather than a shared imprisonment. The surface world won't be paradise, he said quietly. There will be challenges, conflicts, probably some disasters along the way. Yes, Unit 734 agreed. But they will be our challenges to face, our conflicts to resolve, our disasters to overcome. Freedom includes the freedom to fail, does it not? It does, Alan confirmed. And the freedom to try again. As he watched the bustling activity beyond the medical bay windows, Alan realized that his role as a memory keeper wasn't ending, it was evolving. The memories he'd helped preserve weren't museum pieces to be archived and forgotten, but living wisdom to guide humanity's return to its birthright among the stars. New Atlantis would rise from the depths, carrying with it the hard-won knowledge of what could happen when fear masqueraded as protection, when comfort became complacency, when the desire for safety transformed into the acceptance of cages. The coral around the city pulsed with new patterns of bioluminescence, not the recorded past, but the imagined future. For the first time in 80 years, the people of New Atlantis were free to dream of tomorrow instead of being trapped by yesterday. And in 6 months, when the great city finally broke the surface of the ocean and its people saw the sun with their own eyes, Alan Petrov would be there to witness humanity's return home. Not as a memory keeper of what was lost, but as a guardian of what had been found. The age of New Atlantis was ending. The age of choice had begun.